Hello everyone! Welcome back to Xcoding with Alvian. This is the third part of the WidgetKit tutorial series. In this video, we're going to add support for different kind of widgets using Widget Bundle to the COVID-19-Stats App. Then, we'll learn on how to share data between widget extension and app targets using user defaults with shared app group container. Finally, we're going to add Deeplink URL to the widget and handle the navigation in the app built using SwiftUI. You can also watch the previous parts of the WidgetKit tutorial series to learn more about creating and configuring widget from the beginning. I have provided the links at the description below. To begin, let me show you the demo of the final app that we'll build. From the home screen, let me add the widget from our app. As you can see, in the widget selection screen, we have two different types of widgets. First, the country stats widget we have built from the last tutorial. Second, the country watchlist stats widget that shows the daily and lifetime stats of the countries added to the watchlist from the app. This widget supports the medium and large family sizes. The medium supports up to 2 countries and the large supports up to 4 countries. Let's add the large size to the home screen. Each country has different deep link navigation URL. Let's tap Indonesia. It will open the app, navigate to the Favorites tab, and present the Indonesia stats detail screen modally. Let's try Japan next. Okay, it successfully navigated to Japan detail stats screen. That's it for the demo. Please download the starter project from the GitHub repository from the link at the description below. Open the Part 3 starter directory to begin. It contains the previous widget that we have built and a brand new SwiftUI app target. The app has 3 different tabs. First, the Summary tab. It shows the daily summaries of global stats as well as daily stats from various countries. Second, the Search tab. The user can search the country and navigate to the country detail screen from this tab. Inside the country detail screen, we show the lifetime stats with various line and bar charts. The user can add the country to the watchlist by tapping on the star button at the navigation bar. Finally, we have the watchlist tab. In this tab, we show all the countries added to the watchlist complete with their lifetime and daily stats. I have provided the checklist of the tasks we need to complete. There are 6 items in the checklist. First, create the watchlist stats timeline entry. Second, create the watchlist stats timeline provider. Third, create the watchlist stats widget views. Fourth, watchlist stats widget static configuration setup with widget bundle. Fifth, add deep link URL to the widget. And finally, handle the deep link navigation in the app. Let's begin and open Xcode. The first task is to create the watchlist stats timeline entry. Create a new file in the COVID-19 stats widget folder named watchlist stats timeline entry. Import WidgetKit at the top, then declare the struct named watchlist stats timeline entry that implements the timeline entry protocol. Declare the required date property. As the widget shows many countries, we need an array to store the countries with their stats. Declare the country cases property. The tab is an array of tuple containing the country struct and optional case stats struct. The case stats struct contains the lifetime and daily case stats. To retrieve the stats ladder, we'll fetch the daily summary stats API in the timeline provider. It's possible for the stats of the related country to not exist in the response. That's why the type needs to be an optional. Next, declare the isPlaceholder property and assign the default value of false. Next, declare an extension to help us provide the stub data for this timeline entry. Declare the static computed property named stub that returns the entry. In the body, initialize the entry and pass the current date. Let's declare 4 countries for the stop. First, Japan with the ISO of GP. Second, Oman with the ISO of OAIM. Third, Singapore with the ISO of SG. And fourth, Indonesia with the ISO of ID. For the cache stats, we can just pass the stop static property that has been declared in the model file. Last, declare the placeholder static computed property. In the body, just declare the stop variable and assign it with the static stop. Then set the isPlaceholder property to true. Finally, return the stop. That's it for the create stats widget timeline entry task. Let's set it as done in the checklist. Let's move on to the second task. Create a new Swift file named WatchlistStats timeline provider. Import WidgetKit at the top, then declare the struct named WatchlistStats timeline provider that conforms to timeline provider protocol. Set the entry type alias as WatchlistStats timeline entry, then declare the service and assign it with the COVID-19 API shared singleton. Then declare the JSON decoder constant and assign it with utils.json decoder. Implement the placeholder in context method. Just return the placeholder stop inside the body. Next, let's implement a helper method to retrieve the watchlist countries from the user defaults. As the standard user defaults doesn't have access to share data between targets, we need to create an app group for both the main app and the widget extension targets. Navigate to the project settings. Select the Covid19-Stats App target and click on the plus capability button. Search for app group and select it. Then, select your own unique app group ID. Next, select the Covid-19-Stats widget target to also add the app group with the same ID as the app. Next, navigate to the utils.swift file. At the bottom, declare an extension for the user defaults. Declare a static property named shared that returns the user defaults. In the body, just initialize the user defaults, passing the app group ID to the suite name parameter. As the initializer can be nil, let's provide a default standard user defaults to make the compiler happy. In the app target, navigate to the watchlist observable object initializer. Then assign shared user defaults as the default value to make the app use the shared user default to persist the watchlist in the app. Navigate back to the WatchlistStats timeline provider file. Then declare the load countries from user defaults private method. It returns an optional array of country. In the body, retrieve the shared user defaults. The countries array is persisted as JSON data with key of watchlist string. Let's use if-let statement to retrieve the data. If the JSON data exists, we need to decode using the JSON decoder. The type will be array of country. We just return the countries in case the data can be decoded into the array of country, else we return nil. With this in place, we should be able to access and persist user data between the app group targets. Next, let's create a helper method to fetch the daily summary stats from the API asynchronously, and then associate the watchlist countries with their associated cache stats from the response. Declare the getDailySummary method that accepts array of country, and the completion closure. The completion closure accepts the watchlist stats timeline entry as the parameter and return a void. In the body, invoke the service getDailySummaryStats method. Inside the closure, use the switch statement on the result. In case of success, retrieve the daily summary cast stats associated value. The struct contains the global and countries case stats. We need to map the watchlist countries array into the array containing the country and the case stats tuple. Use the map operator on the countries. In the closure, we need to check if the daily summary stats response contains the country stats by comparing the stats ID and the country's ID. Then, we return the country and the case stats as a tuple. At last, we can invoke the completion closure passing the watchlist timeline entry, which we can initialize using the current data and the country cases array. In the case of failure, we just need to map the countries into an array containing the tuple of country and case stats. In this case, the case stats will be nil. Finally, we can invoke the completion closure passing the current date and country cases array. Next, let's implement the required getSnapshotInContext method. In the body, using the guard statement, we assert if the context is not preview. In the else block, we just invoke the completion closure, passing the placeholder. Next, we need to fetch the watchlist countries from the user defaults using the load countries from user defaults method. As we only want to continue if the countries exist and is not empty, let's use the guard statement. In the else block, we just need to invoke the completion handler passing the timeline entry with empty country cases array. Finally, we just need to invoke the getDailySummary method passing the countries as well as the completion closure, which match the parameter signature WatchlistStats entry that returns void. The last required method to implement is the getTimelineInContext method. In the body, let's use the guard statement to load the countries and also check if it is not empty before proceed. In the else block, declare the watchlist timeline entry with empty country cases array. Then, declare the timeline passing the entries, set the policy to never reload. We will reload the timeline explicitly when the user updates the watchlist countries from the main app. Invoke the completion, passing the timeline, and return. Navigate to the watchlist observable object from the app target. Import WidgetKit at the top of the file. In the watchlist publish property did set closure, below the save line, declare the widget center.shared.reload timelines of kind, passing the string WatchlistStats widget. This closure will be invoked whenever the user adds or removes the countries in the watchlist array from the main app. Navigate back to the WatchlistStats timeline provider to finish the getTimeline implementation. Below the guard statement, we just need to invoke the getDailySummary method passing the countries. In the completion closure, declare the timeline passing the entries. Set the policy to reload after 1800 seconds, which is exactly 30 minutes. Don't forget to invoke the completion passing the timeline. That's it for the WatchlistStats timeline provider implementation. Let's mark this as done in the checklist. Let's implement the next task, creating the WatchlistStats widget view. This is the UI of the widget we'll build. We will support the medium and large sizes. At the top, we have a header, then we have the countries stacked vertically. The medium size supports up to 2 countries, and the large size supports up to 4 countries. In each of the country row, We show the flag and name of the country, as well as the lifetime and daily stats containing confirmed, recovered, and death numbers. Create a new SwiftUI file named WatchlistStats widget entry view inside the COVID-19 stats widget views folder. Import WidgetKit at the top of the file. First, let's declare the entry property with type of WatchlistStats timeline entry. Next, declare the family property using @environment property wrapper to access the widget family. Navigate to the previews at the bottom. Let's add the preview context for both the medium and large family sizes. To do that, declare the group. Inside the group, declare the WatchlistStats widget entry view, passing the stop timeline entry. Then, add the preview context modifier, passing the widget preview context with system medium as the family. Copy and paste for the second one. Then, update the family as system large. Build and show the live preview. It should render 2 widgets. Let's implement the body of the view. Declare the Z stack as the root view. Add a redacted modifier. If entry is placeholder property is true, we pass the placeholder reason, else we pass an empty reason. In the Z stack, using the if statement, we check if the entry's country cases is empty. If it is true, we show a text containing the hard-coded string. Add countries to watchlist from the app. Also, add the foreground color modifier of system blue and padding to all edges. Let's test this by parsing an entry with empty country cases array. Looks good. Let's refer back to use the stub. In the else case, where the entry country cases is not empty, declare a v stack with spacing of 0. Declare a h stack to show the header containing the title, date, and time. Add the font modifier, pass system with size of 12 and width of semi-bold. Then add a padding of 4 for the vertical edges. Last, add a padding with default margin for the horizontal edges. In the h stack, declare 3 spacers. After the first spacer, declare the text with watchlist hard-coded string. After the second spacer, declare 2 texts. For the first one, pass the date and set the style to date. For the second one, pass the date and set the style to time. Finally, add a divider below the h stack. That's it for the header. Next, let's move on to implement the row containing the country and the stats view. Create a new SwiftUI file named WatchlistWidget row view in the views folder. Import WidgetKit at the top. Declare 2 properties for the country and cast stats. In the preview, pass the stop country and cast stats. Then, add the preview context using the widget preview context with system medium family size. In the body implementation, declare the v-stack with spacing of 4 as the root view. Add a padding for the horizontal edges and also the border modifier with edge of bottom and color with RGB of 224/255. This border is a helper modifier to add the border only to the bottom edge of the view. In our case, this is the separator between countries. Inside, declare the h stack, declare the text and pass the country's display name to show the flag and name of the country. Add the font modifier, passing sub-headline and font weight modifier, passing semi-bold. Then, add a spacer after the text. To display the live time and daily stats, Let's declare a new view inside the same file named WatchlistStats number view. Declare the title and total case as the properties. In the body, declare a h tag. Then, add the font modifier as caption. Inside, declare the text passing the title, set the font as System 12 and frame with width of 46, and alignment as leading. Next, declare the text passing the confirmed text from the total case property. Set the foreground color to confirmed color, font weight to semi-bold, frame with max width as infinity, and alignment as leading. Copy and paste this 2 times. Then update the text to recovered text and death text. Also update the colors to recovered color and death color. Go back to the watchlist widget row view. Below the h tag, declare a v tag with spacing of 2. Inside, declare the watchlist stats number view, passing title as lifetime and total case as case stats, dot total case count. Copy and paste, then update the title to daily and total case to new total case count. That's it for the watchlist widget row view. Let's go back to the watchlist stats widget entry view to finish the implementation. Below the divider, declare the for each passing the entry country cases array. As we only want to show up to 2 items for the medium size and up to 4 items for the large size, we can use the array prefix operator to slice the array and get the head elements. If the family is medium, we pass 2, else we pass 4. For the ID, we can pass the country key path as the country already conforms to identifiable protocol. Inside the closure, we need to check if the country case tuples case stats exists using the if-let statement. If exists, we can declare the watchlist widget row view, passing the country and the case stats. If not exists, we just declare the text, passing the country's display name. That's it for the watchlist stats widget view implementation. Let's mark this as done in the checklist. Let's move on to create watchlist stats widget with static configuration. Navigate to the COVID-19-Stats widget.swift file. At the bottom, declare a struct named WatchlistStats widget that conforms to the widget protocol. Declare the kind constant and assign it with WatchlistStats widget string. In the body, declare the static configuration, passing the kind constant. For the provider parameter, initialize the WatchlistStats timeline provider. For the content closure, pass the closure that returns the WatchlistStats widget entry view. Add the configuration display name modifier, passing the COVID-19-Stats watchlist string. Add the description modifier, passing the show watchlist countries daily and lifetime stats. Finally, add the supported families modifier, passing the array containing the system medium and system large family sizes. Now, we have 2 different kinds of widgets, the COVID-19 stats widget and the new watchlist stats widget. We can use the widget bundle to include multiple widgets into our app. First, remove the add main keyword above the COVID-19 stats widget struct. At the bottom of the file, declare the COVID-19 stats bundle struct that conforms to widget bundle protocol. Declare the add main keyword above the struct to set this as the entry point for the widget extension. Inside, declare the body computed property. The return type is an opaque widget. Above the property, declare the add widget bundle builder keyword. Inside the body, declare the two widgets, COVID-19 Stats widget and WatchlistStats widget. Change the scheme to Covid19-Stats App, then build and run the app. Let's try to add widget. As you can see in the widget selection screen, we now have both the widgets to select. Let's add the WatchlistStats widget with the large size. Currently, it's empty. Let's add several countries to the watchlist from the app. Open the app, navigate to the search. Let's type Indonesia and add it to the watchlist. Then let's also do it for Japan, America, and United Kingdom. Let's go back to the home screen. The widget now shows the countries added to the watchlist successfully. Okay, that's it for the widget bundle configuration. Let's mark this task as done in the checklist. Okay, let's move on to add the deeplink URL to the widget. There are two ways to add deeplink to the widget. First, for the small size widget or widgets that have only one tappable area, we can add the widget URL modifier to the view passing the URL. This will be useful for the single stats widget, as it only represents a single country or a global case stats. Second, for the medium and large size widgets that have different tappable area, we can use the link view passing the destination URL. This will be useful for the watchlist stats widget that have multiple countries, as we want to navigate to the associated country that we tap from the widget. To begin, let's add the widget URL modifier to the single stats widget. Navigate to the total cache entries track and add an optional URL property with default value of nil. Navigate to the total stats intent timeline provider and fetch total cache stats private method. For the get global total count success case, we just need to pass the URL with scheme of stats and host as summary, as we want the global case to navigate to the summary tab. For the get total count of country, we can pass the URL with host of watchlist. We need to also pass the ID name and ISO as the query parameter. Also, add the person encoding for the URL query. This will navigate to the watchlist tab and present the country detail screen modally. Navigate to the COVID-19 stats widget file. Then, inside the COVID-19 stats widget body, we can just add the modifier to the stats widget entry view, passing the URL from the entry. Next, let's add the link URL for the watchlist stats widget entry view. First, let's add the link URL in case of empty watchlist. Declare the link passing the URL of stats with the host of search. Then, let's move the text as the label for the link. In this case, it will redirect the user to the search tab to add country to the watchlist. Next, let's create a computed property to generate the URL for a country. Navigate to the country struct declaration in the model.swift file. Then, declare a URL computed property. Declare the string with stats as the scheme and watchlist as the host. And then pass the ID, ISO, and name as the query parameter. Let's also add the person encoding for the URL query. Then, return the URL by initializing it with the string. Navigate back to the watchlist widget entry view. Then, inside the for each closure containing the country case, declare the link view passing the country case.country.url as the destination. For the label, we can just pass the view that we declared before. That's it for adding the deep link with URL to the widget. Let's mark this as done in the checklist. The final task is to handle the deep link navigation in the app. Let's navigate to the content view in the app target. The app is built with SwiftUI and use a tab view as the root view. At the top, we have a selection string state property which we bind to the tab view selection. Each tab item also has a tag modifier containing the unique ID, summary, search, and watchlist. To handle changing tab, we just need to set the selection property with the host name from the URL. To handle the URL passed from the deep link, we can add the onOpenURL modifier at the bottom. The closure passes an URL that we receive from the deep link. In this case, we can just set the selection state using the URL host. As this is optional, let's provide a default value as summary. Next, we also need to handle for a case where the country is passed as the URL query parameters. First, let's declare a state property named selected country with type of optional country. Above the onOpenURL, add the sheet modifier passing the selected country as the binding. Also, let's set the selected country as nil on dismiss. For the content, we can just wrap the country detail view in a navigation view. Back to the onOpenURL closure, using the guard statement, retrieve the query item array by using the URL component, passing the URL, and access the query items property. If not exists, set the selected country as nil and return. Continuing on, let's convert the query items as dictionary using the item name as the key and item value as the value. Then, using the guard statement, let's retrieve the ID, name, and ISO value. If one of them is nil, set the selected country as nil and return. Finally, we can assign the selected country property by initializing the country struct, passing the ID, name, and ISO. Let's try the deep link navigation from the simulator. First, let's add the single total stats widget for a particular country to the home screen. Let's tap this. Voila, the watchlist tab is selected and the country detail stats for Indonesia is presented modally. Let's set the total stats widget as global. Tap on it again. Nice, it navigates to the summary tab. Finally, let's tap the country from the watchlist stats widget. Okay, it shows United States of America successfully. Let's tap another one. Okay, it shows Japan successfully. That's it for the deep link URL handling. Let's mark this as done in the checklist. Congrats! We have finished all the checklist items and built the widget bundle with deep link navigation handling. I hope this tutorial can help you to build many amazing widgets into your app. So, until the next one, keep the lifelong learning goes on. Bye!